So, recently I did an amazing digital circus video on all of the characters, and during that time I brushed up on a concept from the show that I found very interesting, but wasn't able to cover it as deeply to keep the video character focused. Today I will be discussing that concept, the looming threat in the digital circus, the closest thing to the end for anyone trapped there. Abstraction. But we can't even begin to discuss abstraction without bringing up Kaufmo. Kaufmo the Clown was one of the characters of the digital circus before and almost during the pilot. He looks like a simple cartoon clown with a pointed hat, floppy shoes, and beady eyes above a simple grin. We don't know too much about Kaufmo except for what other characters say about him and the contents of his room, because technically we don't really meet him in person. I'll get to that in a minute. Ragatha and Gangle both mentioned that Kaufmo got upset that they didn't laugh at his jokes, or that Ragatha fake laughed and he called her out on it. Gangle mentions it like it was a recent event, while Ragatha mentions it with, "we didn't always get along," which suggests that it's been for a while, which means that we can't tell for certain if this insecurity and aggression came from his declining mental state, or if he always had this chip on his shoulder. Recently, Gooseworks revealed a little more about Kaufmo's character during GlitchX 2023. During GlitchX 2023. Apparently... Testing. Apparently, if Kaufmo was, or would have been made, and made it into the final cast lineup, he would have been similar to Ragatha, that he was friendly and happy, but was using that to cover up his true feelings. Michael Kovac, Jax's voice actor, also said he was, quote, very cheery, optimistic, toxic positivity kind of clown character. Of course, this is coming straight from Jax's mouth. Jokes aside, I could definitely see a degree of something toxic about Kaufmo. After all, he was apparently so insecure that he was willing to get upset at two of the sweetest, most harmless characters in the circus. He must have known they meant no harm, and still, he got ticked off. Though they also said that if he and Pomni would have met, they probably would have made good friends. As for his relationship with Jax, that too is a little weird. So, Jax gave him mocking nicknames like he did with Gangle and Kinger, so it would seem to mean that he too was one of his targets. But not only did Jax know where to find the bowling ball he wanted from his room, that might be nothing, but he also seemed visibly upset twice, both while encountering the abstracted Kaufmo and later on after he is dealt with. He seems upset, but less annoyed and more... something else. Were they friends? Were they rivals? Is Jax a deeper character than smarmy sasshat he puts himself out as? It's unclear, at least for now. Kaufmo also seemed to be social with Kinger, as he is the one to recite that Kaufmo had been talking about an exit and acting strange in the time leading up to his eventual changing. He started to become obsessed with the exit, frantic and upset, and more so than usual. On first glance at Kaufmo's room, it looks like... well, it looks terrible, but let's deconstruct the terrible in a moment and first look at the room itself. Kaufmo has a bed, a nightstand with a plant on it, a desk with a radio on it, and even a rocking horse. In fact, there's a few kid toys in here, such as some blocks and those beaded coaster toys you might see at a doctor's office. It's unknown whether this means Kaufmo was childish in nature or if these were like enrichment toys. Basically, so, in comparison, when an animal's in a zoo or sanctuary, they give them toys to help keep them entertained and happy, as elsewise they will become restless, their minds will deteriorate, which is known as zoochosis. It is disturbing and very sad. Considering the situation with the characters, trapped in their enclosures and constantly under observation, it does feel very zoo-like. Maybe Caine gives them toys to keep them entertained. Or perhaps since the place is pretty much nothing but toys, Caine just gives them toys because that is his default. It's unclear, but seeing Kaufmo's deterioration across his room, clashing against his corner of kitty toys, it's very uncomfortable. It's very sad. There's also a shelf that holds props for, assumedly, his acts. A prop comic, maybe? Or maybe just spare knickknacks for inspiration. The most obvious thing in the room, well, except for the words painted on the walls, are the paintings on the walls, and they are quite disturbing. Most are gruesome self-portraits of Kaufmo with demonic features. Others are of distorted passageways, exit doors, eyes. Two of the most notable ones are the one of Kaufmo sitting alone on a wire in an eerie fog, which I find very self-explanatory, and one of a figure who looks very much like Kaufmo sitting under a spotlight as a black figure covered in eyes creeps up on him. By Kinger's account, Kaufmo began acting strange recently when he began to obsess over an exit door. This is assumed to be the exact same exit door that Pomni has seen and gone into, the one Caine started but didn't finish. Kaufmo became obsessed with the exit and escaping, even going to the lengths of writing "exit" and "no way out" all over his walls. There is even an eerie drawing of a giant Caine chasing a small, running, helpless Kaufmo. During the events of the pilot, Kaufmo was a no-show at the introduction ceremony, being replaced with a cardboard cutout and a note that Kaufmo didn't show. This was when Pomni arrived and was introduced to the digital circus. At her mention of an exit door, Kinger tells her about Kaufmo, and then Ragatha decides that they should go find him and introduce Pomni to him, while Jax wants to harass him and steal his bowling ball. On the way over, Ragatha cryptically tells Pomni that when someone loses their mind in the digital circus, something terrible might happen, but she doesn't clarify what. They ring Kaufmo's doorbell, but there is no answer. Jax unlocks the door because he has the key to everyone's rooms, which might be the scariest thing in the pilot. Or it would be, if not for Kaufmo. Kaufmo has abstracted. So what is abstraction? Abstraction isn't death, but it's the closest thing you can get in a place where you can't die. It's a nightmarish occurrence in which you lose control and become a monster. Characters will lose their forms and become these raging black masses covered in eyes who seem to be highly aggressive. And I say seem because Kaufmo is the only abstracted character who we have seen so far, so he is what we have to go on. Now, the other abstracteds we see are shadowed in the basement, so it's also unclear if they all share the same shape or behavior, but considering how wary Ragatha and Jax are of them, it's pretty likely that they all become violent, which makes sense in what abstraction is caused by. So, abstraction is caused by a character becoming mentally unstable. I'm not just talking about Pomni's regular bouts of anxiety and disassociation either. She gets close to something akin to a breakdown and she doesn't show any signs of abstraction. This takes something much more extreme, and it takes a while to fully kick in. Just from the state of Kaufmo's room, we know that he was on a decline. I think the most telling point, and I might be overthinking this, but I think it might be this painting, the one of him under the spotlight. I think it might be giving us a window into Kaufmo's psyche, and again, I might be overthinking this. This clown standing underneath the street light, with the abstracted form waiting in the darkness. Like Kaufmo was trapped in this little circle of light to avoid abstraction, but it was always waiting right outside. If he made any attempt to escape, it would get him. Eventually, it would get him. It reminds me of Ragatha's coping mechanism of going along with everything and being almost naively optimistic just so she doesn't risk getting too upset and abstracting, as it is clear that is a huge fear of hers. In fact, that is pretty much the only thing she's afraid of, that we know of. Well, that and centipedes. On the other hand, Zubul equates abstraction to giving up, but whether abstraction is the process of really giving up, or Zubul just considers it giving up is unclear. Sort of like how some people might equate ending one's life to giving up. I'm not saying that abstraction is a parallel to that. I don't think it is. I just mean in comparison. I mean, Kaufmo could have stood in place forever and never abstracted, but that made his world nothing more than a spotlight's worth of safety. Now, as I said earlier, Kaufmo is not the only character who has abstracted. The corridor is filled with crossed-out portraits on doors where characters used to live, their portraits now X'd out in red. While it's never directly stated that all of them have been abstracted, from Ragatha's wording, yeah, I think we can safely assume they all abstracted, and they're all down in the cellar. Well, that and the mass is in the cellar, an empty black void with water in the bottom. This has happened plenty of times. And not only is there seemingly no way to reverse it, we're not even sure if someone can be stopped midway through abstraction. Ragatha kind of implies that Caine can help Kaufmo, but then he just dumps him in the cellar with the others. Maybe that was what she meant, maybe as in, take care of Kaufmo. Because the risk of being trampled isn't the only threat when it comes to the abstracted hunting you. When a character or NPC comes into contact with an abstracted character, they start to glitch out. And not only do they glitch, but whoever comes in contact with them can glitch as well, such as in the case of when Ragatha was glitching out and Pomni grabbed her hand, and her hand began to glitch as well. And not only that, but from Ragatha's wording, it is extremely painful. This also happens to the Gloink that Kaufmo attacks, and then the Gloink Queen after he, for lack of a better term, beats the hell out of her. We don't know what became of them, but Caine is able to fix up Ragatha and Pomni in an instant. Meanwhile, Kaufmo is left to rot in the basement with the others. Soon his portrait will be X'd out and he too will be forgotten. And that is all we know about abstraction. Except... So the whole reason I made this video is because I had a thought. An epiphany, really. I noticed that the word abstraction was rather direct, and as such, I went to go check definitions and see if I could suss out any hidden meanings. That was when I first discovered that abstraction is actually a term used with computers. Considering that the Circus exists inside of a computer and all, it might be the origin of the term used in show. And the definition is eye-opening. Abstraction in computer science is the process of removing elements of a code or program that aren't relevant or that distract from more important elements. Now, my knowledge on computer science is limited, so trusting this definition, if abstraction in the digital circus is named after computer abstraction, which it really looks like there is, then that changes everything. Because that would mean that the characters don't just abstract because they go cuckoo. It means that they go so crazy that they are no longer relevant and distracting, so they have elements of themselves removed so that they are out of the way for more important ones. Basically, someone would stop performing, and then something would deem them unuseful, abstract them, and put them out of the way while the other characters continue to perform as they're supposed to. That would mean they don't abstract because they go mad, and then they are abstracted. And this would explain why someone as out of it as Kinger or Pomni, who is consistently mind-breaking, shows no sign of abstraction. And this would also explain maybe why abstraction corrupts other assets. With it changed, it is now unstable and unusable, so maybe when it interacts with a stable asset, it causes them to glitch out? And who knows, maybe those abstracted assets are taken from the old characters and put into new ones, like part of Kaufmo was removed to be put into Pomni, and he was chosen because he is no longer a viable character. So if this is going on, who is doing this? Well, there's three possibilities. There's Caine, there's always the possibility of someone we don't know about, and it could be some sort of background process. Let's start with Caine. Now we know from Gooseworks that Caine isn't evil, he's just an AI who doesn't quite grasp certain things about humans. You know what else he is? He's a liar. He lied about there not being an exit door because it wasn't finished and didn't fess up until Pomni had seen too much to repute it. Now, this doesn't mean Caine is evil, but it does establish him as someone who will lie to hide things from the characters. Like, Caine seems shocked when Kaufmo abstracted, but then he makes this insincere, goofy face, and you take into account that Caine claims he can see everything, that someone put up the standee and made the note that Kaufmo didn't show up, and somehow Caine, who was missing throughout the entire Kaufmo rampage, didn't notice anything? Sure, maybe he's just really oblivious, except when he knew instantly that Pomni was out in the void. But maybe also Caine knew Kaufmo abstracted and didn't say anything as to not affect the show? After all, it was Jax who unlocked the door to get in, and he's not supposed to have the key. It's all very fishy. Plus, this might still align with the Caine is not evil thing if Caine simply doesn't understand the implications of what is happening. But more than likely, Caine is the ringleader, but he is also just an AI inside of the program. Likely, if this is going on, he isn't controlling it. Maybe he does know what's going on, though, and is just lying to the characters to hide it from them. Or maybe this whole abstraction is madness idea came straight from the characters and not from Caine. This, Caine being an AI who knows what's going on but doesn't recognize the full extent of what it means, would also explain why Caine is so nonchalant about abstraction, because he is part of the program. So the idea of abstracting data seems natural. It's just a thing that happens. So he just keeps them alert and moving, and it doesn't have to happen. On with the show. But if it's not Caine, which I suspect it isn't, well, who is it? Well, there's always a possibility, as I said, of someone working in the background making these serious calls. Another AI running around. Maybe the elusive A from the C and A sign Pomni found behind the exit door in the office area, but there's no way to tell at this time. But maybe it's not an AI at all. Maybe it's the digital circus programming or the computer itself. If Caine himself is just another character created for the circus, then perhaps while he seems in control, he's not truly in control. He's limited by something else. Perhaps the circus itself is weeding out those who are not pulling their numbers. Some divine and cruel algorithm who decides who's too busted to pull in viewership. Now, I don't mean you, Mr. YouTube algorithm, sir. You've been very good to your most faithful and devoted daughter. Yes. Don't know why I did a golem voice at the end there, but, I digress. Of course, other possibilities could be, possibility number 1, Kaufmo actually escaped the digital circus, and when he did, his left-behind body in the circus abstracted. I've actually heard some people believe that theory. Number 2, Kaufmo found the real exit, or was searching close, and he was abstracted to keep him from looking deeper. And 3, and I brought this one up earlier, as the only ever clown, Kaufmo was abstracted to make room for Pomni. That would imply that Pomni wasn't immediately dumped into the circus, but processed first while assets were taken from Kaufmo. In fact, the possibility that abstraction is stripping assets from the old characters and putting them into new ones, likely once the old character stops performing adequately. There's no direct evidence to this, though. It would just be disturbing. Imagine if Pomni's obsession with the exit was inherited from Kaufmo. Oof. In any case, I think it's too early to really know what abstraction truly is. We know what the pilot says it is, but I think we have a mystery on our hands. And with the numbers that Digital Circus is ranking in, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, yeah, we'll probably get a full season, and maybe we'll figure out more about this bout of body horror when we do. In the meantime, I hope I gave you something to think about in these long months leading up to whenever we get our first taste of the next episode. Something that will hopefully warm into your brain like it did to mine. Anywho, thank you for watching.